Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this event of Crashing Borders, sponsored by the Business Society. This episode will be the second one of our second season. And today, our guest is Astrid Lefort, an alumni from our university, and she graduated in Cambridge in 2018 as valedictorian. Thank you so much, Astrid, for being here.
Of course.
Thanks for coming. And guys, just would like to let you know if throughout the interview or talk you have any questions, just pop it up in the chat and we'll ask Astrid at the end.
Okay, so Astrid, thank you so much for being here. We know it's really early where you are right now. So could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, as you say, it's a bit early where I am right now. I'm in Melbourne, in Australia. It's 7:30 a.m. But yes, so I did my bachelor's at Anglia Ruskin. I did a bachelor of business management. And as you said, I graduated from the class of 2018 as valedictorian, which was a great honor. I then moved to Switzerland to work for 6 months for Colgate Palmolive in their headquarters for Europe, and then I did there a marketing agency marketing internship for 6 months, where I was supporting the brand management teams for Colgate and for Palmolive throughout Europe. That was an amazing experience. But then 6 months later, in February 2019, I moved to Melbourne in Australia to start my master's. So I did a master of international business. So masters here are 2 years. So that summer, I did a summer internship at CUB, which is Australia's leading beer, wine, and ready-to-drink cocktails group. It was a really fun internship. It was a 3 month long during the summer. Um, so there again, I worked again in marketing, but this time I was working in their in-house marketing agency, and more specifically in the consumer data pool. And now I'm actually finishing my master's this week. My final exam is on Friday. So, yeah, exciting times ahead.
Very well done on everything. Honestly, it sounds really interesting. So can't wait to hear more about it. And
Thank
good luck with your next week. So in like people who graduate in the UK, especially in business, they not usually go into masters. So why did you decide to do a masters and why in Australia?
Yeah, so I had always aspired to work and live in multiple different countries. So UK, US, and Australia being on top of my list. Um, so although I loved Cambridge, I loved London, I really loved my 3 years there. I decided to pursue a master's degree there in Australia because I thought it was going to be a great way to have a pathway towards having a full-time visa here. Um, so it wasn't as much for the degree itself, but more for the opportunity to have employment in Australia afterwards and have an accreditation to then find a company there. Um, so I know I wanted to do a master's degree in business, but I wasn't really ready to specialize just yet because I barely had any experience. So I kept my degree quite broad. So I specialized in international business because I knew I want to work for multinational. This is the one thing I knew. Um, that's what I did my first year of my master's. But after my first internship, and my, as well my second internship in marketing, and especially in the consumer data pool, I realized I wanted to do a career in marketing, and that to do so, having basics of data analysis and visualization is so important, and it would be a great asset to stand out from the crowd in Australia. So in my second year of masters, so this year, I decided to minor in quantitative data analytics. And that now gives me leverage for more marketing roles, and especially in brand management, it's so important to understand the value of data.
Yes. So our next question, as now a lot of us are going through the application process for graduate jobs, graduate schemes, or internships. We were wondering, how do you find these internships, and how did you find your two internships in the past?
Yeah. So my first internship at Colgate in Switzerland, it was a long process. I graduated from my bachelor, sorry, in yeah, about in June. that year, but I was originally looking to stay in London for 6 months before I moved to Australia to find internships. I applied for a lot of roles. So if there's one main takeaway, please keep going, keep going. I probably went through 20 plus interviews before I ended up this one. Um, but one thing I did at the time was that every time someone reached out to me on LinkedIn, I always accepted an interview, even though sometimes it wasn't necessarily a role I was interested in. A lot of recruiters sometimes tend to reach out to you in your last year, especially if your LinkedIn is quite up to date. Um, but I tended to always say yes, especially if I was not interested in it, because that gives you practice and it takes the pressure away if it's not a role you actually want. But it gives you an idea of the questions recruiters are going to ask you. It also just gives you more confidence, especially when you have to do this like on a camera in these times. Sometimes you may feel a bit uncomfortable, at the beginning. Um, and especially because straight out of uni you do not necessarily have a lot of experience, but recruiters know that. So a great thing to do is to leverage anything you've done, any work you've done, especially throughout uni. um, so, for example, if you've done group projects at ARU with different nationalities, you can show you've worked in multicultural environments. You can show, especially for MNCs, so multinationals, which is what I wanted to do, showing you can work with teams with such a diverse experience or background is so important. Um, if you've had difficulties with teammates, as I'm sure we've all had, working in a group project, talk about it. Talk about your stakeholder management. It's a great way to show how you deal with conflict, how you can understand and put yourself in people's shoes. Emotional intelligence right now is so important to recruiters as well. And again, any activities that you did at uni, so for example, attending these talks, going to societies, conferences, all of this added to your CV, and it shows curiosity and proactivity for you. So ultimately, that process, I got lucky to start. I had family friends in Switzerland, which allowed me to start looking to work in Switzerland. And the process took about, I would say, a month and a half and a couple of stages, but I eventually landed this internship at Colgate. Um, and for my second internship at Carlton Breweries, so in Australia, it was a bit more challenging, especially because moving into this country, I didn't know who were the main industry leaders in Australia. I had never heard of most of these companies. I was kind of aware of the British market, but not as much of the Australian market. Um, so it took a lot of groundwork to understand who are the leaders in here. The process itself as well was really long. Um, it was about 7 stages and it took 6 months. So if there's one main takeaway I got out of this is cater your application to the job to make yourself stand out. I know this sounds very generic, but this is the one thing that you have to do. Um, for example, for this one job ad, they had told me that they give free beer as a reward for employees. And in my interviews, I mentioned, okay, I really like this beer from your portfolio. And it shows that you've read everything carefully. It shows a bit of personality. It shows it like makes you stand out a bit. You can even mention this on your cover letter. This is actually, I think, what I did at the time. I used a lot of buzzwords like excited, passionate, because they want to see your personality. They want to show why you want to work for this brand, especially why their company. Um, it also shows you did your research as well. And then finally, it goes without saying, make sure you address all the job requirements in your cover letter one by one, especially soft skills like leadership, proactivity. In these times of global pandemic, these are more important than ever. Um, so this is mostly what I did throughout the process. These are the key things that I did throughout the process to get that internship, which was really competitive, but eventually it worked out, and I worked there for 3 months.
It all sounds so interesting, and thank you for sharing all the tips. But as you've already mentioned before, like it all starts at university, so it's really important to engage in like as many like program societies as possible. So, what advice and tips would you give to people who are still at university? How can these people make sure to make the most out of their time at uni and prepare for the future?
Yeah, so as you say, it sounds really generic, and I know everyone tells you that throughout uni, but please get involved as much as possible. This is the one thing that's going to make you stand out, and recruiters love this. So even if you're maybe scared to put yourself out there, start by attending society events like these. Then you can get into a committee, start to get to know people, look into programs. I know, I think it's still running at the time, the LACE program from the business school at ARU. Um, it was the most helpful program I've had to do. The gate and the engagement team of the business faculty at Anglia Ruskin is so helpful, and they're so friendly. So if you ever have, I know if you want to get engaged, but you don't know where to start, I think you should always just reach out to them and ask how you can get involved.
Shout
These
out to Nicola.
Oh yeah, shout out to Nicola, shout out to Margarita. Um, these people are just the nicest people, and even to this day, I still keep in touch with them. They're just so helpful. Even as alumni, I do feel supported. Um, and yes, I can't vouch for this program, the intern program of Labs. That was the most helpful thing for me to find internships because that was my only work experience throughout uni. I didn't have any actual work experience aside from hospitality jobs. Um, and this program gave me such diverse activities through that, and you meet amazing people, which brings me on to my next point, the people. Like, get to know people, keep in touch with them. Networking is so important, and they can help you professionally, and because you never know what people are going to do after they graduate. They can move countries, they can pursue masters, they can get into your dream role. So this is the time to build lasting relationships. um, and because the best of my time at uni was the people, and some of them I'm still in touch with. I was just in Vietnam in New Year for New Year's to just visit one, my first ever Cambridge friend. So these are the things that are so important. Once you graduate, keep in touch with the people, keep in touch with the staff, keep in touch with what's happening at ARU. I know there's a few LinkedIn alumni groups that you can be a part of. People always posting jobs there, or just sharing tips that are always just useful. And connect with your teachers as well, and classmates and the faculty staff on LinkedIn. This is such a great way to keep in touch because your emails eventually are gonna go. Your tuning emails are gonna go away. So, and yeah, it's a great way to keep in touch with them after you're finished uni.
So our next question actually regards the pandemic. I know that now it's a pillar of our life and we're all on lockdown. And so you said that some processes have changed and everything. So regarding the pandemic, a lot of people find it difficult and are worried about the future. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I can understand how people would feel very uncertain about these sort of things. And I definitely relate because my last employer was meant to have a role for me after my master's, but because Melbourne this year has been locked down for over 22 weeks, business here really struggled, and this company had been laying off a lot of people. So I'm now myself in the same situation as all of you, which I definitely understand. But this time it's an opportunity to show different skills, and I'd say even like soft skills. Um, we've had so much spare time now, so it's good to show what you've done in this spare time. Um, and again, I know everyone feels pressured, but there's less pressure to have a gap right now in your CV because employers, they know what's going on. Everyone knows. So it's good to show what you did instead. Um, so for example, I know there's so many like online trainings. I know Esther just this KPMG virtual internship. That's on my to-do list as I graduate to do. LinkedIn has so many trainings as well. So when you start looking for jobs and you see, for example, I know me, a lot of jobs are looking for experience using SAP or Nielsen, and that's not necessarily something you would have done at uni. It's interesting to be able to show that through maybe a LinkedIn training or things like this. So try and do maybe trainings that look aligned with your job's aspirations. I think the Forage is the new name of this inside Sherpa that does this internships of King PMG. They have heaps of really good free virtual internships, which look so good on your CV, and recruiters they love this. Um, and it's important as well to highlight like the new soft skills you've had, especially for remote working. Um, I know now companies are more agile than they ever have. Um, so showing that you have skills, for example, using Slack or Microsoft Teams, show that you're accountable, show that you're autonomous, adaptable. These are all things that you want to be showing right now more than ever, for recruiters, especially in these times. So you may have to cater your CV or your cover letters a little bit to these times, but there's definitely still an opportunity. And as things will open up again, they will look for people more than ever. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And as you also mentioned, like, just don't stress because, like, literally everyone is in the same situation. So it's not just you, it's everyone. So really just like try to make the best out of your time and yeah, just try to be productive. So going back to uni a bit, how can you use what you've learned at uni in the professional world and maybe also in your daily life?
Yeah, so I think what came with a business degree, I had never had a business class ever before I started my bachelor's. So obviously all this ground knowledge was so important. But I think what comes with a business degree as well is an attitude. I think becoming someone who's proactive, someone who now I am not scared to approach job posters directly, especially in these times. This is what I've been doing, and this definitely pays off. It takes a bit of guts, but it always pays off. Obviously, uni teaches you so much time management. Um, Especially now in this pandemic world, is sometimes a bit difficult to allocate time for studying, time for relaxing, um, like taking a step back from this desk. Sometimes I know it's a bit awkward, but it's easier as it goes. You can learn that as you go. Um, and again, as I mentioned before, definitely stakeholder management. I know dealing with difficult teammates at uni, um, this definitely um, this is definitely transferable skills that you will use in the workplace. I know in my last internship, stakeholder management for me was a difficult thing because I was working on a project that involved many different stakeholders that had different motives. So if you work with people who have different motives, you're not their first priority. And learning how to be emotionally intelligent and empathetic um, teaches you how to actually understand the project from their point of view and bring your project moving forward as you work. Um, and again, as I said, because I did my minor in analytics, um, as someone who aspires to be a marketer in brand management, um, data has definitely been so important, at least having basics of it. So understanding how to critically view data. So if you're presented data, instead of just like looking at what you're being said, actually understanding what's behind and what they want to show you, because data can always be biased. Um, and also how you can show it as well. You can, like, this biased way of showing data can also be useful as well for yourself. If you as a marketer has to pitch your project to your senior management, knowing what you can and cannot show is so useful. Um, it's so useful again, yeah, to present your projects and become more critical of what you're being presented by others.
Yes, I know that data analytics like skills have been super important. I've seen that all in all my interviews because I have a business degree. All the time we need to show our numerical skills, and I can attest that we have all these tests to do and math tests because we have a business degree. So I think having that on your CV is definitely quite important. One of our last question, actually our last question before going on to the audience, is how is your academic and personal life balance as you're a master's now, and how was it before and after the pandemic?
Yeah, so before the pandemic, I kind of kept the lifestyle that I used to have at Skin. So I spent all my life on campus, not necessarily to study, sometimes to study, but also for the social aspect of it. I think it's so important to see people moving, have talks with people. Um, I used to, yeah, just see the city a lot and study a lot as well. Also, one main thing was that I used to study with friends at the library because I don't think I ever wrote a single page at home in my whole uni time before. Throughout my bachelor's, I didn't write one line of my thesis back home. It was all done in the library because to me, back home was my time to relax, and the library was my time to be efficient. So that definitely was the biggest change, I think, having to go put my workplace at home and having to do that by myself. So one thing that I did throughout my whole year, because I've been on online classes since February now, was calling my study buddy every day to do study sesh via Zoom. And while each other are put on mute, but you can see, your camera and your little screen, this gives you accountability to actually do work. I found this was really good for me to be a bit productive. My uni started these things called shut up and write sessions where the same way a bunch of students who need to study from this set hour all go on Zoom, mute each other, and you can see everyone studying, so it gives you pressure to actually start writing and get your things done. um, and one of the things that was a bit complicated was to take a break from my desk, because you don't see a set work day. It's so hard to take a step back from it. um, so I just set myself distinct times to go outside, obviously when it was allowed, to go exercise, and my relaxing times would not be always just watching Netflix in front of a screen again because my head was just going crazy at this point. Um, but like, luckily now we've been back on campus because Melbourne is doing so well with this virus for the past couple of weeks. So restrictions are easing. So I'm back to having a bit of a social life. Um, but for everyone who may still be restricted, so I'm thinking of you guys, I suggest to just check on with your friends as often as possible. So either to catch up or just to study together, because if like me you can't focus by yourself, it's so important even for the social aspect of it. I think it's so important to keep things going and your motivation still going forward.
Yeah. Thank you so much for answering all of our questions. So now we gonna look at the comments and see if anyone had any questions. So a question from Thomas. So how do other institutions see a degree from ARU when you apply for a master's?
That's a great question. That was something I was a little bit nervous about, especially because I was applying to Monash University, which is quite a well-ranked uni. It's in Australia, a uni which is part of the Group of Eight, which is the the eight best unis of Australia. I was a bit nervous applying for this uni, yeah, with my Anglo-Ruskin degree, but um, ultimately, what they look at was my transcripts. Is this one thing I want to say, at least for Australia, unis and recruiters, they will really look at your grades. Every recruiter I've ever spoken to, every unis I've spoken to, they want a transcript every time. Um, so I was fortunate enough to have had a good average throughout my time at Anglo-Ruskin. I know.
Better than good, just so you know.
Yeah, I think I graduated with an average of about 84.5, which was more than enough, I think, because my uni required, I think, a 75% average to apply. But again, as I was like saying before, if 75 or 65, depending on the uni you want to apply for, if this is something you do not have, you can always leverage it with what you've been doing on the side. So if you say, okay, my average was not as good, but on the other hand, I spent so much time dedicating myself to the university, I spent so much time getting involved, or I spent so much time working on the side, all of these, ultimately, they still work. Um, So I think you should just not be afraid of, no matter what ranking the uni you want to go for your masters is. I think you should still go for it, and use anything, any leverage you have to apply for it. And institutions are definitely okay with having ARU. And again, um, a small thing that I'm sure you guys all know, ARU is in Cambridge, and everyone to this day, I may still explain it every time, but everyone still thinks that I'm from Cambridge Uni. And this is something you guys can use. I know this is probably not the most honest way, but I never like lied about it. But my all my recruiters to this day, even if I correct them, always thought that I was from Cambridge. Um, so it's always saying ARU, Cambridge, UK. Um, that always shines. That always looks good. And if someone asks you, it's good to know that actually a lot of the teachers that we had, at least back in ARU, were actually also teaching some units in Cambridge. So these are things you can like also leverage to apply for your masters.
Then we have another question from Alessia. She asks, what was the greatest challenge you faced when you moved to Australia, and was it easy for you to adapt to the new environment?
Okay, so yeah, I think great question, because when I moved here, one big thing, as I said, was understanding the job market. So what are the leading companies here? Um, because what are the top unis in the UK may not be the same in Australia. I mean, I had the example of Australia, but wherever you want to move, if you want to move abroad, understanding your market before you apply for jobs is huge. Because when I applied for this CUB company and I was actually getting through, I realized everyone knew about it, but I didn't at the time when I applied. One thing to also be really aware of, and that I'm still experiencing a challenge with, maybe that's something you don't realize when you're European, when you're fortunate enough to not have to worry about visas and passports and all this. Um, Moving forward to Australia, you'll become an international student. And as an international, um, companies sometimes may have a bias, because finding a visa is not guaranteed. I'm lucky enough to have a French passport, so I have 99% chance of having a visa. But still, this 99% chance of having a permanent residency in Australia, um, companies do not know about this. And if they have a choice between you and an Australian, they would choose an Australian student. So I would say also like looking into your residency status is important, because a lot of companies here are afraid that they will have to sponsor you for you to stay in their companies. So I know, for example, I cannot directly apply for grad programs because I am not an Australian national. But I can still apply for direct hire roles, which is what I'm doing right now. That's something, definitely something to keep in mind, because I did not realize this at the time when I moved here. I think when you're a European, and you evolve in this whole European group, you don't realize the importance of a visa, but for the job market, it becomes actually quite important. So that's something I would say to keep in mind when you move abroad.
We also have a question from Oksana. She's asking, how is Australian educational system is different from the British system? Do you find it more difficult?
In terms of the way uni is run, I found it very, very similar. So, I mean, and my only comparing point is probably to the French education, which is very strict. I think here, the same way to as it is for the UK, I think teachers leave you to be. They are quite like they let you be autonomous. The main difference was, I don't know about you guys, but my course at the time at ARU, usually some of my units consisted of maybe one or two assignments throughout the semester, usually one big assignment for week 12, not that many exams. What I found difficult for when I moved to Melbourne um, was that every unit had so much to do. So for 4 units per semester, I would probably usually have between 3 to 7 assignments per unit. on top of exams for each unit each semester. So time management at the beginning was very complicated because I had things due week 2, week 5. Every different week, I had different things to do. Keeping track of every unit, I had a very comprehensive to-do list to do because that was the main thing that was so different. Because I remember at ARU, most of my things were always due week 12. Throughout the semester, it was usually kind of a breeze. Um, but in terms of difficulty, I think the time management was getting on top of things was difficult, and the workload was a lot. It was a lot of work, but the content was not, at least for my course, because it was still quite a broad course. Apart from my analytics class, which were a bit more challenging. Um, but I think the workload itself was much harder. The content, I would say, was still fine, depending on like compared to ARU.
Thank you. So we have another question that someone is writing, but if either you can unmute yourself or but yeah, I can't stress enough to you guys that I think surrounding yourself with people who really motivate you, like Astrid said, doing all those study sessions are really, really helpful. Like we've been doing that with Oksana, and we've advanced so much on all our assignments and just exchanging ideas, and just gives you a straight schedule because not going to library every day is quite difficult. So our next question is, have you faced any issue that arise from the fact that we are not taught everything at the university?
I think in my first internship, I did a little bit because I was when I started working at Colgate, it was the first time they took an intern in their headquarters. So I think the expectations of me as an intern were probably set a bit up high. Um, but I think that um, ultimately these are things like they know that you only learn stuff at uni. There's so much more that you learn, but there's things that you will just know on the job. There's so many things that I learned, especially for me, on brand management and brand marketing, especially any sort of consumer marketing, that I only learned on the job. But recruiters know that, and the only way to face this and overcome this is actually through internships. I cannot stress this enough because um, it's true that you only learn sometimes the theory of it at uni, and sometimes there's some buzzwords, especially buzzwords. These are being said in the workplace, but you don't know what they mean. Because you don't learn this at uni. So I would say that not to worry about it, but because this is something that you would learn in an internship. If you were to apply for a graduate program again, they would know this, and all these buzzwords or all these applicable applying a theory. These are all things that you'll be able to use on the job. And again, one thing that you can use out of your university degree is always your soft skills, everything that you've learned. Is there things that you don't know when you come into a role? You can always say that at uni you were someone who was proactive, someone who was hardworking, so you can learn fast. You can learn fast, and this is what they want to see.
Okay, thank you so much. If we don't have any more question, thank you so much, Astrid, for coming. We're
Of
delighted
course.
to have hosted you. Thank you to Anna, my co-host. Thank you to the Business Society members and everyone watching and the committee. You can also add Astrid on LinkedIn,
Mm.
Astrid Lefort.
Yes, feel
Yes.
free to add me. I'll chuck my name in the chat. But if you guys want to add me, and if you have any questions, not necessarily now, even later, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy, especially if you have questions about ARU. I've had some ARU students reaching out to me already before, so I'm always happy to answer.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming and sharing all of your experiences. It was really useful. And good luck with your last week at uni. And
Thank you.
we can't wait to have you back once you started your new job and to,
Can't wait. Can't wait to share with you guys.
yes, please. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining. And go follow Crashing Borders on social media at well. You can find us on YouTube and Instagram, and our episodes are available on Apple Podcasts or and Spotify as well. So thank you so much again for joining, and can't wait to hear about your new job soon.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Astrid.
Thanks.